I'm the co-founder of Hustle Fund. Welcome to today's session, which is called How to Fundraise and Close on Zoom. So I want to go through a little bit of an exercise with you. I want you to close your eyes, okay? Remember a time pre-pandemic. This is sometime in 2019, early 2020. Imagine yourself waking up from a semi-comfortable bed at the Hyatt residence in Redwood Shores, California. You're there because that hotel is relatively cheap. And you're going to get ready for a full day of pitching on Sand Hill Road here in Northern California. So you get ready, you take your shower, brush your teeth, you put on your very best Patagonia vest, all right? Maybe it's the blue one today. And then you wipe off the dust from your Allbirds or Adams shoes, and then you're looking ready to pitch, right? So you go get your Uber, you head down to the Blue Bottle in downtown Palo Alto to get that power breakfast, all right? It's going to be the house blend drip and an avocado toast. It's only $26. What a deal. And, after you sort of make sure that there's no, sesame seed or whatever crumble on your teeth, quick check, you call another Uber, and then you head down to Sand Hill Road to take your first meeting. You enter the building. It's got a beautiful minimalist aesthetic that was probably designed by a Japanese architect for millions of dollars. Receptionist greets you, you get sort of settled, and then you're escorted over to the conference room where you see 5 dudes, also in blue Patagonia vests, because it's usually dudes who are the VCs in Sand Hill Road, waiting to hear your pitch. You're going through your thing, you do as best as you can. You try to make sure that everyone's not looking at their phones, but actually paying attention to you. Meeting 1 is done. All right. Then you call the Uber, head to your next meeting on Sand Hill Road. 30 minutes later, you're at reception. Lather, rinse, repeat. Okay. If you had your eyes closed this entire time, you're now welcome to open your eyes again. And I have great news for you. That BS song and dance of in-person pitching may no longer be necessary because it's post-apocalypse time. I'm right now in my garage. This is not a Zoom background. In the Bay Area. This is where I am managing $50 million of assets under management with my team. Right next to me is a child's potty because my 2-year-old is pooping quite a bit in her pants as we're trying to potty train her. Totally cool. And I have 8 toilets, little potties set up all around my house, including my garage. So I'm smelling that. I got some garbage back there, and spiders are attacking me all day long. This is actually the setting that you should expect to see your VCs moving forward and when you go through your pitch. So it turns out that I think that there are a lot of advantages that we're going to talk through when it comes to pitching effectively on Zoom. But generally, I think we're going to expand out the lens. It's not just your pitch, which we're going to tactically talk about today, but also discussing how to run an effective fundraise process and leaning into the fact that you can do this all online moving forward in this new reality. So very excited about today's conversation. So a very quick technical check before we move on, and I'm going to introduce what the agenda is today. We are in a Zoom webinar session. It's going to be really hard for us to monitor all the chat activity, although we do encourage you to chat with each other and share snarky comments and observe my serial killer kind of aesthetic behind me and make jokes about me. That's fine. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your view. And my colleague, Mike, who is our producer for today, he is our head of products and engineering. He is going to be on helping us to moderate some of these questions as well. So you're going to see his face and his voice a little bit later. And I'm going to try to keep today's material relatively short. I got about 25 minutes of stuff to talk about, and I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A because we are entering peak fundraising season early in 2021, and it's frothy. Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce what this is all about. I'm going to spend probably 2 seconds talking about who I am. We'll get into some of the tactics of pitching on Zoom. And a lot of this is actually stuff that I put into practice all the time because, I'm pitching all the time to LPs as well. So there's some things that I've been able to figure out and learn from you guys as founders. We're going to talk about how you design your entire fundraise strategy because I have some very strong opinions loosely held on this stuff. And then plenty of time for Q&A. So before we jump into the material completely, I do want to just recognize the fact that we are not operating these sessions in a vacuum on our own island or in our own garage in the Bay Area. We are able to do this work through the sponsorship of some pretty amazing partners. And I want to introduce a team that everyone should know about. It's GS Futures. So GS Futures is a new multi-stage VC fund that launched in 2020, investing into teams at the early seed all the way through Series D. This team spun off from the GS Group in Korea, which is a legendary enterprise representing assets in retail, consumer, energy, and much more. GS Futures is actively seeking and investing into great hustlers. Go to their website, gsfutures.vc, and tell them what you're up to. I think you're going to be excited to partner with them. Okay, so let us move forward and talk about me. So the only thing you should know about is that I've raised a lot of money, and I've done it almost all entirely through Zoom, especially for our current fund. So hopefully that gives me credibility. Let's move forward. So I think let's talk about the macros here. What is the current state of VC fundraising? It's basically this. We are beholden to our overlord, which is the Zoom platform. This is the gold standard that everyone's using. It's not Microsoft Teams, which is a little bit awkward still. No offense to all the Microsofties out there. It's not like Hopin or anything like that. It's actually still Zoom as like the place where people are going, the tool that people are using most for their pitching. And I don't think that's going to change. It took a little bit while in 2020, once the pandemic started, for VCs to actually feel comfortable in making decisions only online and not being able to meet with teams in person. In fact, a little bit of macro concept, I guess, context on this, which is a lot of VC funds, the traditional ones, had a very specific kind of protocol where the final steps were to meet the founders in person, right? And that seemed kind of reasonable, I think, in the previous era. But in today's post-apocalypse era, no longer happening. It took a little bit of time for people to catch up in my industry, but now we're fully into Zoom, just like my 5-year-old is right now in his kindergarten class. So I'm going to start with some very tactical things about pitching on Zoom specifically. Okay, we're going to get tactical, and then we're going to start to talk about the fundraising process itself. So let me walk through some of these things, and bear with me if it sounds a little bit crazy. I'm going to do something a little bit weird, and I did not practice for this. So I don't even know whether the length of the cable is long enough, but I want to show you what my Zoom setup looks like right now. So I'm going to grab my Logitech 1080p external camera. Okay, I'm going to pull it up like this, move it around, and show you what my setup looks like as we're speaking. So I bought this cheap light from China on Amazon. It cost me $10, I think. I have a 4K monitor, which I bought. Actually, my wife bought for me for Christmas. Super awesome. I have a condenser microphone with an arm right here. Okay. And then actually, just to continue the tour, I don't know if you can see this. I'm actually standing on a treadmill all day at work with a little bit of a kinetic stool here, so I can just perch as needed. And because I'm in a garage, I actually have a space heater here because it's a little bit cold, although it's starting to warm up because I have this gigantic camera here that's representing that it is 67 degrees, or sorry, not camera, clock here that's representing that 67 degrees in my garage because I've been heating it since 6 a.m. this morning. All right, that's the end of the tour of my garage here. Let me put this camera back and I'll sort of talk about some of these elements. So let me sort of just talk about like my reality here. You're going to notice a few things. One is that in terms of camera position, I put it right in the center. I'm kind of center framed right now. I don't put too much headroom above me. Okay, and I have a decent-ish camera. It's a 1080p because I want the clarity so people can sort of see my expressions and smiles and all that stuff. That clock, actually, that gigantic-ass clock is quite helpful. So sometimes when you're in full presentation mode, it's impossible for you to track what the time is. Like depending on what kind of software you're using, it will obfuscate the time. And having that in the corner of my eye really does keep me on track. And being on time on Zoom and ending on time is really critical in your fundraise process, which we're going to talk about in a second. In terms of lighting, I got this that cheap thing. Some people go with the ring light and whatever. I just go with whatever is sort of soft and movable and all that stuff. The last thing though I want to talk about is the sound. Actually, let's talk about the camera again for a second. You'll notice I'm sort of eye level here. And I don't know if you saw this on the monitor, but most of the materials that I was showing is actually like at the high part of my screen. So it makes it easy for me to have eye contact with you, the camera, right? So the new eye contact on Zoom is actually looking directly into the lens. And it's a little bit subtle when you can see me reading stuff like this. The eye tracking looks pretty good. So think about that kind of positioning. It kind of makes it feel, I think, much more natural when you deliver a pitch. Let's talk about sound. Okay. So this is something that I learned over 10 years ago. I ran an education company many years ago where I had to do hundreds of these kinds of webinars, over the course of that career. And if you're to spend $100 on your entire setup that I just talked about, camera, lights, and then sound, I would spend $95 of that on sound. So it is okay for the visuals to be a little bit grainy, a little bit janky. It's okay if the lighting's a little bit off too, but the cardinal sin is actually having terrible sound. This is actually where you get the most bang for your buck. The way that I have it is I have this condenser microphone. It's a Audio-Technica AT 2020 or something like that. It's 13 years old or whatever. I have it on a spider mount, which basically looks cool, does nothing. But I have it on an arm, which is kind of nice. And that is, I know it's getting super technical, but but it allows me to sort of reposition myself quite a bit if I'm sitting or whatever. When you have a condenser microphone, it's important to point it in this range, between your chin and sort of like the lower part of your neck. That actually captures much more resonance and like bass and so forth. Not to say I have like the most like Barry White voice or whatever. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? It's just one of those small little details of having like a meticulously framed pitch that just removes distractions. Now, in my case, actually, let's talk about like, why am I in the garage? Why I don't have a green screen and stuff like this? Let me just get really frank with you. It's just like, I don't want to hide the fact that I'm in a garage. Like this actually, I feel like is my life. You're going to see children running in and out. So it creates a little bit of more authenticity when people can see your space and you're not trying to obfuscate anything. And in addition to that too, like if I'm going to be sort of like a manipulative idiot here, like I think it does make me slightly more relatable, because a lot of founders are also struggling like me. Like they have their own lives. They're sequestered because of their beautiful, noisy kids into places like garages, closets, and so forth. So that's something that's kind of what I want to present as a VC to you as a founder. The other thing too, just like, when you have like that kind of, those kinds of like authentic backgrounds that you're not hiding with like a cute dog or something, it sometimes provides a little bit of a talking point. If you find that there's like a little bit of awkwardness in the beginning of just like, oh yeah, you can see my doggy. Like I just got that puppy like sleeping in the corner, all that stuff. Okay. That's enough on that. So let's talk about the second bullet here, which is avoiding a deck. So when I pitch and fundraise, I never want to use a deck. So bear with me now here. So let's go back in time to that exercise where I talked about closing your eyes, you're in Sandhill Hill Road, you're pitching into a room. The problem is this, which is like, it's really hard to like look at what's on the screen, look at each of the faces in the room. They kind of could be all spread apart if you're in like a full partner meeting. It's just really difficult to track all this stuff. This is where Zoom is a superpower. Everyone's faces is appearing in a Brady Bunch kind of like organization in this nice little grid. So being able to track everyone's faces and expressions is a superpower that you got to lean into. So when I'm pitching, I have probably 10 different versions of the pitch. We at our fund, like we really care about inclusivity, for example. So as I see people starting to nod like more vigorously around our values around inclusivity, like I dive into more kinds of stories about how we support that. In other kinds of cases, we're talking about our unique fund model. We have this unique model where we start with a small check, work with teams and help them on growth projects. And then in a subset of cases, concentrate a much larger check into teams where we've earned mutual trust with each other and want to build a longer term partnership. In those cases, like when we talk about the technical aspects of that and I see people nodding or smiling and so forth, then I lean into that. If I see people start to yawn in a Zoom setting, it's a good time to sort of like crack a joke, tell like an orthogonally weird story to sort of jolt people back into attention. All right. It's much, much, much harder to execute this in a room full of people than it is on Zoom. So having, I think, a really engaging pitch that you just do without slides, especially your first impression pitch, like, when it's sort of like a first meeting kind of thing, is important. And allows you to, pay attention to the faces on the screen, see who's bored, see who's interested, see where you can like sort of put a little bit more nudges into some parts of your story. Now, a deck is important though, because this is an asset that other people are going to need in further assessing your company after your pitch. So the user experience should be as follows. You go through the pitch, or actually before even the pitch starts, you already have a template email follow-up ready to go. Okay. And then you go through your pitch, you end the meeting. Right within 1 minute of concluding the meeting, you hit send on that template saying, great to spend time with you this afternoon. Here's like, I'm glad that we could just talk like regular people, like one-on-one like this, but I wanted to share like a context of deck and a data room. Here's a link to the deck. Here's a link to the data room if it's needed. In early stage, the data rooms are a little bit more optional. And then let's talk very soon, or let's schedule very soon. Which leads me to actually the third bullet here, which is scheduling your next meeting on the call. So I think we sort of talked about this in a previous Hustle Fund session, but one of the biggest screw ups, and I've made this screw up many times, is leaving it vague. Okay, like you go through your pitch, it goes great or goes poorly, whatever. And then the meeting kind of ends. It's just like, all right, thanks so much. Yeah, and that's it. And you'll never hear from that VC ever again. All right. Or like you'll ask them, what's the next step? And you're like, well, we'll let you know. It's not good enough. You got to reserve time, like 5 minutes at the very end. End your pitch a little bit early if you can. And then actually share your screen and load your calendar. Or don't do that and just say like, all right, let's talk about the concrete next steps. How do your investment decisions get made? After today, like how long should we expect a response? And then just like, well, we got a little bit of time. Why don't we schedule our next meeting? Just put a placeholder in. Right? How does Tuesday next week work? All right, just schedule it within the meeting. Do a little bit of that housekeeping work. It's going to feel a little bit awkward, but I think it helps you to drive the process in the further. And you shouldn't rely on the VC to drive the process. They have all the time in the world, right? So I think the action that I always include in my own pitches, which I encourage you to do, is say like, thanks for the pitch. I'm going to follow up with you in 2 days. So if you scheduled your meeting, that's great. Maybe in 2 days, you just confirm that the meeting's still happening. If you don't have the time to schedule a meeting, you have an excuse now because you said you're going to follow up in 2 days to actually schedule that meeting and get some early thoughts or whatever it's going to be. You're going to take the action. You're not going to wait for the VC. Okay. So include that at the very end of your verbal pitch on the Zoom, but also include that in your email that you send within 1 minute of concluding your Zoom. Now, I know this is like super tactical here, but I just strongly believe that it's like this kind of just alpha dog, like on top of things, kind of a framework. It actually does leave a very strong impression as like someone who's like a driven, execution kind of person. So it's just a great first impression when I see that. And I'll be honest with you, like maybe less than 5% of founders I talk to have this kind of approach, when we go through a pitch like this. That's fine. That's something that we can coach. All right, let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about designing your fundraising process here, your schedule, right? So this is actually expansive of this is a topic that's even bigger than Zoom pitching, but I think it's something that I love to discuss with our founders. Let's say that you're going to be raising a bigger round, so $1 million or more. Okay, this process is maybe a little bit less necessary for smaller rounds, like your first $500,000 tranche as an angel round, or with Hustle Fund. So I strongly believe that this is a 2-week process. If you can condense your fundraising into 2 weeks, I think this is actually the model that, this is actually the model that we coach all of our founders on how to do it. So let's talk about like what this 2 weeks looks like. It's actually like 2.5 weeks. So the Thursday before the 2 weeks begins, where you're going to just dedicate all of your time to fundraising, you're going to talk to your other founder friends, your existing investors, anyone who's willing to give you warm introductions, and try to compile a list of, let's say, 50 to 100 VCs, angels, any investors that you want to meet, okay, into like an Airtable or spreadsheet. You're going to figure out who's willing to give you a warm introduction to each one of these people, okay? And then on that Thursday, you're going to ask every single one of your referrers to make their introduction all at the same time. Okay, so that's Thursday. Everyone's dropping 50, 100 referrals for you for introduction all at the same time on Thursday. The next thing you do is you're going to see, like on Friday, a bunch of people opting in. It's like, oh, hi, I'm Eric from Hustle Fund. I'd love to talk to you. Want to schedule some time? You're going to ghost them. You're not going to do a damn thing. You're going to be radio silent. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. So actually, I'll talk about now. So what happens then on Saturday and Sunday is then you'll begin to respond. So this is what we're going to be doing. Okay, let me take a step back here. So the reason why you don't respond so soon is that you want to be in control of the process of whom you're speaking to when. And the idea is this. Okay, on your first week, you're going to start to talk to a bunch of tier 2 VCs and angels, those that like you're pretty cool with, but they're not like super duper ideal dream VCs. And you're going to put some reps in. You're going to practice. Okay, and then you're doing that Monday through Wednesday, scheduling your tier 2 firms. Wednesday through Friday, that's when you've got your reps in, you got your best pitches in. You're going to then move on to your tier 1 funds. Those who would be dream state. You're going to have your best pitches at the end of week 1. Wednesday through Friday with those VCs and angels. Okay, end of week 1, you're going to leave the weekend open. Do not schedule brunch or hike with your husband or boyfriend or your dog. Like just, leave that weekend open, because if you do fund week 1 right and your pitches are going well, someone's going to invite you to take a long hike with them or do some sort of other kind of Zoom coffee session with them over the weekend. You got to leave that time free. So when week 2 comes around, wrap up any remaining tier 1, tier 2 firm discussions that you have as early as possible that week. Wednesday through Friday, get into your tier 3, tier 4, like all the crappy people that you don't care about. And hopefully by that Friday, you've given your tier 1 and 2 people enough time to have enough consideration about your company, answer their questions, and then term sheets start to land all at the same time. And that's when the auction begins. Right? Where it's just like, well, I got a lot of options here, so we're going to start negotiating. I want higher valuation. I want these kinds of things removed, etc. Right? That is sort of the arc that I think we should all be striving for. And the beautiful thing about Zoom, before Zoom, pre-pandemic, maybe you could do 5 meetings a day. Maybe. That's a lot of like Ubering, and that's a plane ticket to Sand Hill Road, right? On Zoom, I think you could fit like 15 of these things in one day if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it, right? Maybe like 5 to 10, right? So like achieving 50, 100 meetings over the course of 2 weeks is a lot easier now. This is where leaning into Zoom has become super amazing for a founder. And oh, by the way, does location matter? Increasingly less. A lot of VCs are biased towards, investing in companies in the region, in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, et cetera. But what COVID has taught us is that, Silicon Valley is more of a mindset versus like a location. And if you're in, Patagonia, and want to run like 100 meetings in your garage over there, it's going to look like you're my neighbor here in the Bay Area. Like, who cares, right? So this is the other beautiful thing about this era that we're entering that makes me so excited. All right, I just got a couple more things about just talking about the fundraising process just generally. Some of this, by the way, is repeat from previous presentations, but I pulled out sort of like my favorite points here just because it bears repeating. So let's talk about lining up your investors. Like what is it going to take for you to figure out like who can give you a warm introduction? I think that the way to do this is, you got to do your research on NFX Signal, Angel List, just see like if there are folks who are like in your industry that you care about, but also expand a little bit further. Anyone who can angel invest into your company at the early stage is just someone who's an accredited investor who's making $200,000 a year in salary or more, $300,000 jointly with a spouse, or has a net worth more than $1 million. And that actually really does expand the pie. These are small business owners, doctors, dentists, lawyers. It's okay to include those folks. They're not negative signal. But I really like to go on LinkedIn first. Like once I've identified who these people are that I want to hit up, see who's a secondary connection, or one where see like who can actually give me a warm introduction, like Jonathan can do with Tracy, for example, and then reach out to my friend and say like, can you make a warm introduction for me? The second thing though, and this is a big one, is having a forwardable blurb. Okay, when you ask someone to refer someone to you, don't make them do any work. Don't go like, yo, Mike, I really want to talk to Bill Gates, right? Can you make an introduction? And he's like, wait a second, I need more context. Like, what do you want to talk about? Like, who are you? What are you pitching? You're making Mike do work, right? He's already super busy doing Hustle Fund stuff. Don't make him do anything. So what you got to do is create a nice, pithy, forwardable blurb that they can pass along in under 2 seconds. And the only thing that Mike has to say is like, interested? ? That's it. And if Bill Gates is interested, then and he says yes, then it's on you to make that happen and schedule. So let's talk about like the elements of a good forwardable blurb here. So in this fake example, it's like, yo, do you mind passing this over to Jane? It's just that's the request, that's the ask. ... You're separating your blurb here now. So quick explanation, make this like one to 2 sentences of what your company does. Show the sexiest details like traction or customer base or pipeline even. Flex something else about, generally I think like team is really good to flex. Say like, hey, we got like all this experience in the space. We're really relevant. And if you have a teaser deck, which I really like, which is just basically like a summary deck, 5 slides or something of what you do, I really enjoy including those as well as your contact information at the end. What's getting a little bit trendy is including like a Notion document. That's like a Notion deal memo. So you may want to consider that too. That's pretty good. And that's it. Forwardable. You can send that to 100 people really quick. All right. I think that was the last slide. And I really wanted to keep it to about 25 minutes and we're already about a minute over here. But we do a lot of these sessions, usually 1 to 2 a month. So a lot of your questions, I think, around the fundraising process and like startup operations can be found on Hustle Fund. Just search for Hustle Fund on YouTube. And you'll find a lot of good advice there. So with that said, we have left plenty of time for Q&A. We can talk about Zoom pitching. We can talk about the entire fundraising process. And to assist me for that, I like to actually bring back my colleague, whom I actually haven't introduced really fully on video or anything like that, Mike. Mike, are you seeing any good questions coming through that we can start to tackle?
We've had some excellent questions, Eric. So a couple of that I thought were procedural, but really valuable. First of all, what happens if you're experiencing lag and there's nothing you can do about it?
Ooh, that is a very good question. Have good internet is like the advice. So this is like kind of like crazy, but that's almost like the cardinal sin, I think, is just like, I mean, like it's very hard to schedule some of these folks. So making sure that all of your infrastructure is in place is really important. So the moment that I had to, when we shut down our offices, like I went to Comcast, which is like, it felt terrible, and like bought the most expensive like gigabit plan. It's like $70 a month. And it turns out that like, that's the most critical business expense I can make, right? I don't charge this to the business, but like, like you just have to have great internet. If you're in a region that doesn't have good internet, you may want to actually consider doing a little bit more drastic measures. Like, take a look at Breather. There might be places or a hotel, where you can sort of go in, make sure that they have super fast internet. In some cases, like hotels will charge you like $25 for the super internet. Like it's totally worth it, especially if you're putting together like $1 billion, or not billion, but like $1 million or more. Especially if you have $1 billion or more of fundraising, like have good internet. But it's just one of those things that like it does sort of like feel like a missed detail, like when someone has laggy internet, and even if it's totally not your fault, like it just doesn't leave like a great impression. So I think just like you have to have it. It's not a great answer. You just have to have good internet. And maybe when 5G comes out, that's a really good backup.
So planning and just careful communication, but comes down to have good internet.
Yeah, and in fact, like Mike, you're a great example of this. So you live in Boston right now, and you chose to go and be like the only person in your local WeWork apparently today, and you were coming in super clear and nice.
Before we get to our next question, just a quick note to everyone that this will be published and you will be able to rewatch this as many times as you like for all of Eric's great tips and advice. Another question that I thought was good, what about the banter that can be a little bit awkward in the beginning of the pitch? You just log on, maybe people are still joining. How do you handle that? Do you just take it by the horns, or do you shoot the shit?
Yeah, so this is why small talk I think it is important, and I actually think it's like kind of crazy. So there's a for those of you who've come to some of these sessions, you actually heard this line from me many times before. So 13 years ago, I was at Stanford University campus, which is where I met my wife 18 years ago, and I got down on one knee, okay, at a beautiful park bench where like we really defined our relationship then, and I said, B, her name is Beatrice, do you want to grow old with me? All right, that's how I proposed to her, and she said yes, thank God. But like the reason why I say this is just like, you know, that kind of small thing banter, it sounds trivial, but at the end of the day, you know, especially at the early stages, you're inviting someone into a 7 to 10 year relationship and building your company. And if it doesn't feel even that natural out of the gate, it's a good sign for you as well as a founder of saying like, hey, like this dude seems like an asshole, or just like super awkward, or like, do I really want to spend 7 to 10 years or even the rest of my career with these people? So it's again, like one of those small kinds of tests that I think are implicit. Like, by the way, just, I'm going to just like self-promote here with Hustle Fund. We do almost all of our pitching on phone. And the reason why is that we think that's a really good checks and balance on our own biases too. Like if I see Mike, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is overwhelmingly handsome and like just has like a really great setup. Like it's just gonna like too much bias us out of the gate, you know, is our view. So we try to do everything on the phone where we can just listen to the ideas, and it does mitigate the banter quite a bit. So we can just like start talking about the pitch, because it's okay to be silent on the phone. It's a little bit less like, it's more awkward, I guess, if it's on video. So here's where I would go with this, just to get a little more tactical. If you notice things in the background, start asking people like, where are they right now? That's like a very easy one. It's just like, so where are you based? You know, during the pandemic, it's like, I see a beautiful tree out there. Is like, you know, is that your backyard? Are you in Lake Tahoe? And then you can make fun of yourself, right? So like my go-to joke is just like, because I'm working in the garage and I have like, you know, bizarre equipment here. Like I say like, yes, this is actually my garage. I have a child's potty right here, a bunch of garbage trucks here, you know, garbage bins here, a body that's dissolving in acid right over there. Like, you know, this is actually a meth lab, you know, like that kind of, you know, dad jokey kind of stuff. Maybe a little bit of dark dad jokes helps, you know. So, you know, just it's a two-way litmus test is what I'll say, of just like how do we vibe in? And then if you need something to talk about, asking about location and like what's your setup like is kind of cool. A lot of people compliment me on my mic. So maybe like one way to do this is just like to have the mic exposed and be like, yeah, okay, just, you know, whatever. Talk about it.
That's a great idea. Have a prop that you can sort of focus people's attention on.
Yeah, that's a better response than what I said. Thank you.
Speaking of backgrounds, does it matter? Like, would you recommend a branded background, a virtual Zoom background, something like what we have?
So I'm agnostic. Like I don't really judge people really ever on backgrounds like that. And maybe it does matter in terms of context. So like if you're in like let's say like a super regulated healthcare space where your primary audience is like executives, perhaps like actually showing something that's presenting something that looks a little more professional could be helpful. You know, like you may want to not come on in a t-shirt. Maybe it's more button-up shirt, and maybe the background should like look a little bit more clean. If you're working on like sort of like a scrappy kind of hacking software kind of stuff or dev tools or something, right? Like the bar is a little bit lower, right? So, you know, having that kind of whatever background is all right. I just think that, again, the sound matters the most. Making sure that you have great equipment where like it just feels like you're sitting next to that person is the most important thing you can invest in. Though what I like about my background is just like, for lack of a better word, it kind of makes me feel like more exposed or naked, of just like, you know, this is how messy my life is right now, right? I mean, like, it's life, right? I mean, that's it, right? So it leads to, I think, a different kind of impression out of the gate of just like, who is this guy, right? Because it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance of like, you think VCs have their shit together, but my life is as messed up as yours, right? So that's my therapeutic rant for today. Let's move
Makes
on to
sense.
another question before I start crying about the state of my garage, Mike.
Oh no, we like your garage. Don't cry, Eric. We've got a couple flavors of the same really good question from Akil, Jennifer. I think Adam's getting to it too. So, what if you just want to temperature check? Like, how do you do it? Maybe you're sensing that people are kind of distracted. Maybe you're looking at your own slides and you don't see their faces, or maybe somebody just doesn't turn on their video at all. How do you handle that?
Really great questions. So let's start with the last one. And I might need a reminder on some of the earlier ones too, because my memory's terrible. So I would ask people to turn on videos. It's just like, hey, like if it's possible, I'd love to see who you are. You can just ask. And if they say no, that's okay. They just said no, but it's not like a neg on you, right? It's going to have no bearing. So just asking people to turn on a microphone is good. All right. Now, okay, let's talk a little bit about the cognitive science part of this stuff. And I'm a like elementary school educated cognitive scientist. Okay. But this is what I understand, which is you have sort of like this part of your brain, which is really lazy, that just like stereotypes, biases, and typecast people. Right. And actually we operate in that zone pretty quickly. Because it's easy. It doesn't actually expend very much energy to operate in the zone. It's like, oh, Mike's pitching Uber for X, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't need to think too deeply about this. The goal here, though, is to drive people up to the neocortex, which is actually the heavier processing part where people are like really intently listening, really trying to learn new patterns. It's very difficult to bring people up to the neocortex because it requires your body to expend more energy, which your body tries to fight against. Right. Hence, like why you see lazy things like, oh, yeah, I've seen 1,000 of these Uber for parent minivans or something like that. So waking up people to get into the neocortex is really hard, but it's certainly possible. And the way that I do it is by looking at people really, really intently and trying to get cues from their face, because most people are not poker faced at all or have terrible poker faces, except for Elizabeth Yin, my co-founder. If you ever see her, you have no idea what she's thinking. Okay. True. Yeah. Mike's like known her for like 20 years also. No one knows what she's talking about or thinking, she's the sweetest person ever, but like great poker face. 1 percentile though, right? Everyone else is pretty terrible. So when you start to see people kind of like glazing over, and you can sort of see it, it's like, expressionless face and like eyes are dead, or just like doing this, what am I doing right now, Mike?
You could be just checking your phone.
I am checking my phone. You're going to see a lot of that, right? Then you got to sort of wake people up. And the way to do that and to try to get people back into like neocortex mode, I think is like tell a funny story or tell like orthogonal stories. So you're going through the pitch and then Mike's glazing over. And I say like, actually, I want to take a really quick second to share like a side story here, like, and talk about one of my key clients, Sally, who's like the CEO of this business, right? Just something that kind of like weaves out of the narrative of the pattern of what a pitch seems like with these kinds of side things is really important. And I usually have like 5 of those kinds of stories ready to share, a funny one, a sad one, an angry one, and having that in your back pocket is really helpful. And this is, again, like so much easier to assess when to drop those kinds of neocortex reminders on Zoom versus when you're in the conference room. All right. Anyway, I hope that answers the zeitgeist of those questions.
I think that was an exhaustive answer. I actually wanted to follow up on the previous question because we got an excellent follow-up question. What if it is the VC that you're pitching to that's having connection issues? How do you handle that gracefully? Do you acknowledge it? Do you suggest it's following up at a separate date?
I really don't know how to answer that question. That's a freaking excellent question.
Right.
If I put myself back in, so here's what I'm trying to weigh right now. I think you should run a very tight process, right? So you don't want to be like, we're going to schedule out in like 3 weeks. That's where like the VC is starting to dictate their timeline, and you should be dictating your timeline to them, right? So I think the backup that I would go before even scheduling is just like, why don't I just call you and let's just do this on the phone, right? Because I do think that expedience of just being able to deliver your pitch and just do it is great. Go through your pitch on the phone, call them directly. Hopefully the connection's better. They're not like on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean or whatever. And maybe the action item there is just like, if it's helpful after today's phone call, I'd love to try to do another video pitch with you. But if not, like, and you have everything that you need, like, here are my materials, and just send it within 1 minute of hanging up. So I would just probably jump into Zoom, to phone.
That makes sense. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears here a little bit and jump into the actual content and material of the pitch. Got some great questions there. So first of all, continuing in the psychology theme, what do you look at, especially if you're not presenting a deck? Do you look at your counterparty? Do you look at your own slides? Do you just kind of walk around the room and
like what are you looking at as a founder specifically?
Yes.
Right at the camera.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking at your face. That's all you need to focus on. Don't pace around the room. That seems like oddly professorial. It is an interesting power move, but like, you know, everyone can see you. Just you know, make sure that you have like a nice little frame around yourself. But staring right at the person is very helpful, and then also looking right at the camera. One thing I'm going to show you is like I want to remind people of the camera positioning. So I'm going to pull back my thing here. I see you, Mike, and I see myself right at the very top. And that allows me to go back and forth to see, to make it just feel like I'm maintaining eye contact with you. So I hope that answers that person.
And I've noticed that when I talk to you, Eric, I feel like you're looking at me. You're not looking down on your screen.
I try not to. So I always like minimize the vertical length of Zoom to as small as possible on gallery mode. Put that at the very top of my screen, and then I put all of my apps, my notes below it.
Okay.
That's how I do it.
So jumping onto the deck, if a founder decides that they're not going to just read their own deck, should they still have some sort of visual cues, maybe big picture slides or something like that for the demo?
For sure. Yeah, totally. I think like, you know, if you go back and forth into sharing, it's great. Just don't like handicap yourself or just index too hard on like the crutch of your slides. So I guess like my favorite kinds of pitches are actually like when it's mostly like this, and then someone actually then shows me like a demo of the product. Right? We're actually investors in a really cool company called VimCal. It's like a really fast kind of like scheduling and calendaring tool, sort of like the Superhuman, if you're familiar with that in the email context to calendar. And again, just notice I went through my lazy typecasting. It's the Superhuman of X, right? That's the best way I can describe it because I'm lazy. And what they did was like they went through their pitch just like this. It was awesome. And then in the meeting, they're like, okay, we're going to have you install VimCal right now, and you can try it yourself just to get a sense of experience. They forced me to share my screen, download the link, do it. And I was like, this is so clever, right? Just like I'm really, really getting a super deep sense of like how this product works. And I like, it was just like a really well done pitch. So if you have like those kinds of products that can engage people, like let's log into my demo account, pretend you're user X, you know, and you know, you're about to make your first sale, you know, do these next two things. Cool.
Got it. Another great question just came in. Let's say that you have 2-3 co-founders. Typically, you would be in the room together with them pitching. Maybe when you're on Zoom, you're going to pitch yourself. But should they dial in? Is that a signal? How should they be participating? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So usually for first pitch, I would make it a one-on-one, right? It would be like normally the CEO and founder or co-founder of the business, just one-on-one. If there's a follow-up meeting that involves a lot more partners and so forth, then maybe bring in your founders too, because you know everyone's going to want to see who you work with. But one person should really be taking the lead in doing all the pitching. Your co-founder should be there to just provide support. So example, this would be like me and Mike are co-founders of business. I'm a little bit more of the business end. Mike actually was trained as a computer scientist. So maybe I should take the lead because I'm the more salesy dude. And then when someone asks a question of just like, well, like, have you considered these like kind of technical considerations? Mike jumps in and says like, actually we have, you know, and here are the things that we've done to solve that kind of dynamic.
Okay. Ciara, I like your question. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name too badly. So the question is basically, what if you have a demo and the most impressive part of what you're pitching is your demo? Do you jump into it? Do you let the investors play around with it separately? How do you handle demo-based pitches?
Yeah, great. So I think the demo has to be short. Can you do it in like 5 minutes, right? Maybe 10 minutes max, but I think it has to be short. If there's a way for like a call and response where you can force the VC, like I did in that VimCal example, to participate too, that's even better, right? Like, so in some cases, it might be like a technical, like enterprise kind of thing, but create like a dummy account that they can log into and then ask them to share their screen, right? If possible, so that they can do it with you. That's like, I think the very best kind of demo is like kinesthetic tactile learning. Like you're forcing me to actually do and listen at the same time. So that's totally cool, but I would always start off with just one-on-one video like this and just like, hey, I'm Sarah, I'm the founder of this company and I just wanted to like give you an overview. And actually, if we have some time, I want to show you the demo too. Do that sort of in the middle maybe of the presentation, but rely mostly on the video.
Okay. I'm getting a couple of interesting questions that are slightly off topic, but very much still concern the remote experience of pitching investors in this new world. So normally maybe you would email people in your city and ask for intros, like you'd meet founders that are local and you'd use that local element to build your network. Yeah. When you're not doing that in a lockdown, how do you get VC intros? Do you just do Zoom calls with other founders randomly all over the world?
Yeah, I do lots of Zoom call coffees all the time. And the really cool thing about it is, again, just like, I actually think that the networking gets easier in this apocalyptic era. I keep calling it the apocalypse because it just felt like that with my 2 young kids for a while. And also I cleaned up an apocalypse in my garage for my daughter, who again is learning how to use the bathroom just earlier today. So like, but like jumping into a Zoom, be like, hey, Mike, I am really excited about what you're doing. I just love to hear about your journey a little bit. You down for like a 15-minute coffee on Zoom? That's like, you can fire off, you can schedule like, 10 of those a day. And it's, that's, don't do 10 a day, but like a handful of those a day is not too much outside of your work. And it's just, you can, lots of flexibility in scheduling, and even better, you have the world at your disposal. Maybe Mike is in Singapore and you're here in California. So like it's end of day for you, beginning of the morning for him. So I do think that these kinds of Zoom coffees are great. Right, Zoom meetings, and it's no different from any other in-person meeting to build rapport, share learning, etc.
Makes sense. Let's see, what other good questions should we cover?
Probably so many here, right? I mean,
Adam's asking, what if your pitch is going really, really well, but you've got another pitch starting at the back of the hour? Do you just keep going, or do you reschedule? How do you do?
So you have to end on time. You have to end on time. Okay, the moment that you become 1 minute late to the next meeting, you're going to be 2 minutes late to the next meeting, 3 minutes late, 10 minutes late. And at some point, it just makes you look like really bad. All right, you have to end on time. So the way that I would handle that kind of situation is to, say like, look, I just want to respect your time. I see that we only have 2 minutes left, and this is such a great conversation. Why don't we schedule our next call now and just move into the scheduling phase?
Building the momentum, taking it at a high point, creating a high point in the future.
Yeah, there's this, I don't know if any of you saw like Seinfeld ever, but like there's this one episode that I remember where George Costanza discovers that if he leaves a meeting on a high note, or if he's like keep getting the meeting to like high momentum and on a high note, he should just like stand up and leave, and like it'll just leave a great impression. It's kind of like what I'm talking about. Momentum's great. It's like, look, I love where this is going. We should schedule our next call either right now or asynchronously on email. But it's a pleasure. I want to respect your time, and unfortunately, I got another meeting I have to run to. I would actually sort of subtly drop that you have another meeting that you have to go to. That's even more important than this. I know it's a little bit of a dance, but it's a little bit of a flex. Right. And I don't want founders to ever feel like they're in like a supplicant kind of position, right? Where it's just like, I'm begging you for cash. I'm just going to like, bend to your will. That's a wrong relationship. Like, can you think of like any like healthy relationship that's like that? That's called an abusive relationship. Right. So like, just make sure just like, look, this is great, but I got to run, that's a flex. That's good.
Don't be in an abusive relationship with your VC.
Well, try not to. I mean, like, look at me and Mike. Like, don't have this kind of dynamic where I'm bending to his will, and you can do better.
All right, we've got Sharik, Haley, Anthony, a bunch of people want to know. Can you clarify a little bit what you meant about how the deck should be handled if a pitch itself does not include the deck? Do you send something ahead of time, after the pitch, so on?
All right. I feel very strongly about this. So maybe I should go back to sharing slides again to help to answer this. I'm going to go ahead and hit share. Can you see the slides again?
Yep.
All right. Let's go back to, is it this slide? This one, I think. So have all your materials ready before your pitch, right? So you have your long deck, a data room if you have it. Again, those are sort of optional. It doesn't really make as much sense at seed stage or pre-seed stage where we invest. And then most importantly, have like an email ready to go. So the only thing I think you should share before your meeting is the forwardable blurb that your referrer had sent over to the investor whom you're going to be speaking to. And again, this should include the details like of a teaser deck. I'm a big fan of teaser decks. Again, these are a little bit of an optional. Maybe it's a Notion deal memo that provides at least some very baseline like details about what this company is all about. Some of our companies actually don't even do this. They just have the blurb and that's it. And they've run great fundraising processes. So that's the only context that people have. And I like to keep people sort of ignorant because you want to control the messaging. You know, like the problem is like if you share your long deck, your data room before the meeting, then like a VC like myself, who's like, I just cleaned up poop this morning. I'm like, I didn't get any sleep last night because my daughter's teething. You know, like literally right before this, I was defrosting my LG refrigerator too, because it's like freaking not working. And I'm like so angry because that thing was so expensive, and don't ever buy like an LG refrigerator. And now I'm like getting back into work, right? Like my mind is not in a neocortex zone, right? So if I look through your deck, again, I hope that you think I'd be a little bit more thorough than this. I'm just typecasting. It's just like, but if I look through this deck in this kind of mindset in my garage, maybe I typecast too quickly. I start to write my own script of what this company's about, and I'm too quick to pass, right? So just share the sexy, limited details before the meeting, control the messaging by actually going through your pitch during the session. And then your follow-up meeting, the follow-up template is actually where the meet happens, right? That's where you share the full deck, the data room, the next steps, like when you're going to be scheduled for the next meeting, and the reminder that you're going to be reaching out again in 2 days. So I think that's kind of like how the narrative should run for every single one of your investors that you're pitching, all 100. So make sure you have it all lined up.
Great. Thanks for reviewing that again, Eric. We're getting some excellent questions coming through in the last few minutes. I think we'll probably have time for maybe 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, maybe 2. Yeah, please.
So one question that is really interesting to me, and I think important to us as a fund, to reduce bias, does it make sense sometimes to pitch via audio, particularly on apps like Clubhouse and outside of traditional Zoom settings?
Phone is good. I really like, again, I prefer pitches on phone. When people ask me for Zoom, I usually decline. And again, like that's just because of our belief in as a fund that it allows us to hear the ideas more objectively versus like subjective bias that can happen on Zoom. Pitching on Clubhouse and all that, yeah, maybe it could work, but it's a little bit weird, right? Because like Clubhouse is sort of like a public setting. I know they have like pitch competitions and all that, but at this point, I don't know how seriously investors are using that medium. So if you are worried about bias, then I think like asking for a phone is great. The way that I usually set it up is like, look, I know you got a ton of Zoom bias. Maybe like we can go for a walk, and I can just like, we can just talk on the phone. And I can just share what we're working on. I love that. That's so smart. And the reason why is, you get the body moves and the blood's flowing. I think it just gets easier to move back into that neocortex zone for the VC. And it also just sounds really fun, right? To take a 30-minute walk and talk to someone versus on the phone versus like sitting at my garage desk and hearing the pitch. So phone is, I think, the best option outside Zoom. Is a long way of saying it.
Great. So to bring it home, I think for the last question, I'm going to throw it out to the gearheads in the room because everybody wants to know, Eric, could you again tell us which microphone do you have? Which microphone should we buy and how much should we spend on it? Any specs are welcome.
Okay, let's do this. So I really love the microphone that I have right here. It is an Audio Technica ATB 2020. I bought this microphone in 2008, so it's pretty old. So, but Audio-Technica condenser microphones, I'm a big fan of. I think you can get this microphone for about $99 now. I have this thing on a spider mount, which frankly, is this like thing that kind of reduces vibration and all that stuff. And I am increasingly feeling like it's pretty unnecessary. There's not really that much motion that I have. What's very important is this arm. So just get whatever, microphone arm you can buy on Amazon. Doesn't have to be terribly expensive. Probably like under $20 is fine. But again, like this is the core equipment here of everything. If you can only buy the microphone, that's fine. Like I think you're already way ahead of so many other people. You can do podcasts now, talk to the media, and pitch very well. In terms of the camera, I really like my Logitech 1080p camera. It's just a very cheap standard. I think it's now like $20, $30, no more than $50 kind of HD camera. Again, don't solve too much for the camera quality itself. More so than just making sure that you're framed very well is very important. So. And that the eye position is really good. All right. So you can do that on your MacBook Air or whatever. That's fine. I usually use the MacBook Air for these things, but I just recently bought a Mac Mini and it's awesome, by the way. And then in terms of the lighting, again, like I'm going to do the tour again. This like super duper cheap light I got from Amazon. And this actually is cool because it sort of swivels around. So like depending on, where I'm standing, it can be helpful to have like a bit of that swivel. I don't remember what this was, but it was super cheap. And the first one I got broke because it's like this, it was like drop shipped directly from China in some sort of random factory. And I was like super awful. I'm actually convinced that like this thing is going to light on fire someday. So it gets very hot. So maybe get something better, but some sort of soft light that allows you to reposition. I think ring lights are really unnecessary. They're kind of expensive unless you're doing like real influencer stuff. Right. So that's my advice. And again, just like invest most of this money into a good condenser microphone. I think you'll be really happy about that. Maybe we have time for just one more question if we make it quick, Mike, before we do some wrap up.
Let's see. I think generally speaking, people just want to know, like, how do you organize? How do you prepare? I think you've covered a lot of that, but do you have any other questions on just the first thing that you say when you jump onto Zoom? What is it?
Yeah. By the way, I saw a comment from Ira that like super triggered me, and thank you for calling me on this. I'm going to respond to that really quickly, versus that, and get to this like, what do you say first thing? So Ira asked like, what is that Nazi book on your table? It's actually The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. My apologies for the symbol. I know that's super offensive, and it does trigger me too to see that. But this is considered actually one of the best history books about like why fascism occurred in Germany. And I'm actually working through this. It's about 1,200 pages. So apologies for the symbol. It actually is deeply offensive to me as well. But I do think that this is a wonderful book. So with regard to the actual question here, which is like, what do you say? So the first thing is just like, hi, thank you so much for your time. And just out of curiosity, like, where are you based right now? I think that sort of is a good way to sort of get things going. And then really quickly after that, I usually follow up with well, here's what my agenda is today. Like I just had a couple of objectives. Like I want to introduce myself and, walk through the company, but I also would love to hear about your fund and your process for how you make decisions. I think that's actually a really good thing to cover in the meeting as well. So making sure that like it feels really balanced. It's like I'm not just pitching you, you're pitching me, and you gotta explain to me how you make your decisions and why it's why I should even consider you. Got to have some of that element too. Okay, so I think that's all the time that we have today. Mike, thank you so much for the excellent moderation, and even more importantly, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out, spending time to talk about Zoom pitching, the fundraising process. Your questions were all really excellent. As we wrap up for today, I just want to, again, send a huge shout out to our sponsors, GS Futures, for sponsoring this session. Really great partner that we work with. And last but not least, just, if you are a pre-seed stage, company working on software. We're a generalist fund at Hustle Fund. We would love to hear about what you're working on. You can go to hustlefund.vc, and there's a "What are you hustling" button right at the top of the fold. Go ahead and click on that. Our team reviews every single company that comes through that door. And in fact, whether you're a warm referral to our fund or someone that just came to this webinar today that we haven't met yet before, everyone's asked to go through this form to have equal footing. Right? This is a very important part of our process to make sure that we limit our bias on warm referrals as well. So thank you so much for your time out there. Good pitching in 2021. Please stay safe. And thanks for this opportunity to speak together today. Have a good one.